Welcome to Essentially Soulful, everyone. I'm Betty, and today we're diving into a topic that might feel uncomfortably familiar to many of you. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right in a relationship, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it?
That's exactly the kind of situation we need to talk about, Betty. And you know what's so important to understand? Even the most intuitive, self aware people can find themselves questioning their own reality in these situations.
We're joined today by DeeAnna, host of Essentially Soulful and a psychotherapist for 30 years. DeeAnna, I'm curious, why do you think this topic is particularly relevant right now?
Well, Betty, we're living in an age where relationships are becoming increasingly complex. With social media, digital communication, and changing social dynamics, the ways people can manipulate others have become more sophisticated and, unfortunately, more prevalent.
Let's start with the basics. The term gaslighting gets thrown around a lot these days. Could you help us understand what it really means?
Absolutely. The term actually comes from a 1938 play called Gaslight, where a husband deliberately dims the gaslights in their home while insisting to his wife that the lighting hasn't changed. It's a perfect metaphor for what gaslighting really is, a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you question your own reality. Of course, this provocative storyline was later turned into a movie.
That's such a vivid example, so it's really about making someone doubt their own perception?
Exactly. And what makes it particularly insidious is that it's often done so gradually that the person being gaslighted doesn't realize it's happening. It's like slowly turning down the dimmer switch on your self confidence. You might not notice it happening, but eventually you find yourself in the dark.
That's a powerful analogy. Could you give us some concrete examples of what gaslighting might look like in everyday life?
Of course, one common example is when someone denies that certain events occurred. Let's say you clearly remember your partner making a hurtful comment during an argument, but later they insist it never happened. They might say something like, "You're too sensitive," or "You're remembering it wrong."
I imagine many of our listeners are having some aha moments right now. What makes people particularly vulnerable to this kind of manipulation?
That's an important question, Betty. The truth is, anyone can become a victim of gaslighting. It's not about intelligence or strength, it's about the nature of human trust and how we naturally tend to believe those closest to us.
Something you mentioned earlier really caught my attention about how anyone can become a victim. I think there's often this misconception that only certain types of people experience gaslighting.
That's right. And that misconception can actually make it harder for people to recognize when it's happening to them. They might think, "I'm too smart for this," or "I would never let this happen to me." But gaslighting doesn't discriminate.
What are some of the early warning signs that someone should look out for?
Often, it starts with that feeling you mentioned at the beginning. Something feels off, but you can't quite explain what. You might notice persistent contradiction of your memories, frequent dismissal of your feelings, or being told you're too sensitive when you express concerns.
Those seem like relatively subtle signs. Are there more obvious red flags?
Yes, there are. Clear red flags include someone repeatedly denying things you know happened, making you question your memory of specific events, or telling you that other people think you're crazy or unstable, especially when you haven't actually heard this from others.
That's quite manipulative, using other people's supposed opinions against someone.
It is, and it's particularly effective because it isolates the victim. They start to feel like they can't trust their own judgment, and they're less likely to reach out to others for support or validation.
You know, DeeAnna, as we're talking about these more obvious signs, I can't help but wonder about the less obvious forms. Are there more subtle ways that gaslighting can manifest?
That's such an important question, Betty. What you're touching on is what we sometimes call ambient gaslighting. It's like background noise in a relationship that you might not even notice until it's pointed out to you.
Ambient gaslighting. That's an intriguing term. Could you elaborate on what that looks like?
Think of it like a room's temperature changing so gradually that you don't notice you're getting uncomfortable. It might be consistent small dismissals of your experiences, subtle undermining of your decisions, or even praise that somehow leaves you feeling worse about yourself.
Could you give us a specific example? I think our listeners might find it helpful to hear what this looks like in practice.
Of course. Imagine someone who consistently responds to your achievements with comments like, "Oh, that's great. I'm surprised you managed that." It sounds like a compliment, but it's actually undermining your capability. Or they might say, "You're so lucky your boss likes you," instead of acknowledging your hard work.
Those examples really bring it home, DeeAnna. It's disturbing how something that seems like a compliment can actually be undermining. What other forms might ambient gaslighting take?
Another common form is called reality shaping. It's when someone consistently offers alternative explanations for your experiences that minimize your perspective. For instance, if you express concern about their distant behavior, they might say, "I'm just busy with work. You're reading too much into things."
That's tricky because sometimes people are genuinely busy, right? How do you tell the difference?
That's exactly what makes ambient gaslighting so challenging to identify. The key is to look for patterns rather than isolated incidents. Is this a one time explanation, or is it a recurring pattern where your concerns are consistently deflected or minimized?
Patterns, that seems to be a crucial point. Could you help our listeners understand how to start recognizing these patterns?
One effective strategy is to start keeping notes about your interactions, not to build a case against someone, but to help yourself maintain clarity about what's actually happening. When we're in the midst of gaslighting, our memory and confidence can become clouded.
That's really practical advice. Are there other concrete steps people can take?
Yes, absolutely. Start paying attention to how you feel after interactions with certain people. Do you consistently feel confused, doubtful, or somehow less than after speaking with them? That's often a red flag. Also, try to maintain connections with trusted friends or family who can offer outside perspectives.
Speaking of trusted connections, what role can friends and family play in supporting someone who's experiencing this kind of manipulation?
They can be absolutely crucial, Betty. One of the most powerful things they can do is simply validate the person's experiences. Something as simple as saying, "Yes, I see what you're talking about, and your feelings make sense," can be incredibly healing for someone who's been made to doubt their reality.
That brings up something important: the impact on mental health. How does long term exposure to ambient gaslighting affect someone?
The effects can be profound and far reaching. People often develop anxiety, depression, and a deep seated self doubt that can affect all areas of their life. It's like their internal compass gets gradually recalibrated to someone else's false north.
That's such a powerful metaphor. For someone listening who's recognizing these patterns in their own life, what would be your first piece of advice?
First and foremost, trust yourself. If something feels wrong, pay attention to that feeling. Our intuition often picks up on these dynamics before our conscious mind can articulate what's happening. And remember, recognizing the pattern is already a huge step toward reclaiming your reality.
DeeAnna, you mentioned trusting yourself as a crucial first step, but after experiencing gaslighting, rebuilding that trust must be challenging. How does someone begin that process?
You're right, Betty. It's like rebuilding a muscle that's been weakened over time. Start small. Trust your basic preferences, like what foods you enjoy or what makes you comfortable. Then gradually work up to trusting your bigger feelings and perceptions.
That's interesting, starting with simple, concrete things before moving to more complex emotional matters.
Exactly. Another helpful practice is to create reality anchors, keeping a journal, taking photos, or saving important messages. These aren't meant to be weapons in an argument. They're tools to help you maintain your connection to reality when someone's trying to distort it.
Speaking of distorted reality, what about professional help? When should someone consider seeking therapy?
Honestly, as soon as you recognize these patterns, therapy can be incredibly valuable. A skilled therapist can help you validate your experiences and develop stronger boundaries. They can also help you understand why you might have been vulnerable to gaslighting in the first place.
That's such an important point about boundaries. Could you talk more about setting and maintaining healthy boundaries?
Of course, strong boundaries often start with simple statements like, "This is what I experienced," or "I know what I saw." It's about being firm in your reality while not necessarily engaging in arguments about it. Remember, you don't need someone else's permission to trust your own experiences.
As we wrap up, what message would you like to leave with our listeners who might be questioning their own experiences right now?
I want them to know that questioning what's happening to you doesn't mean you're paranoid or overly sensitive. It often means your internal warning system is working exactly as it should. Your feelings and perceptions matter, and you deserve to be in relationships where your reality is respected.
Those are powerful words, DeeAnna, and I think they're especially important given how subtle some of these manipulations can be.
Yes, and remember that recognizing gaslighting, whether it's obvious or ambient, is the first step toward reclaiming your power. You don't have to figure everything out at once. Just starting to trust that little voice inside that says something isn't right is already a huge victory. I'll drop some resource links in the show notes.
Thank you, DeeAnna, for sharing these invaluable insights. To our listeners, remember that healing is possible and you don't have to navigate this journey alone. If today's discussion has resonated with you, please reach out to mental health professionals or trusted support systems.
Thank you, Betty. And yes, to everyone listening, your experience is valid, your feelings matter, and there is always hope for positive change.